He is planetary governor, said the intelligence officer, indicating the frozen image of Van Physophorus on the pig screen, since it is to him that the tithing and legal responsibilities fall. Have we dealt with him before? Said Lord Commander Chekapov, who had sat at the head of the briefing table in the map room aboard the Merciless. Beside him were liaison officers from the Imperial Guard regiments, currently embattled in Gazelle, many of whom were now among the few survivors of their regiments. The form of Liberian Dephobius loomed, standing, for none of the map table's thrones were large enough for his armored size. Only the administratum, replied the officer, referring to a pile of parchments in front of him. He was always high-handed, but nothing that cultural differences could not explain. The last tithing mission thought him to be a reliable link between the Imperium and the Aristia. Never any problems. There are problems now, said Chekapov. Would you not agree? Yes, Lord Commander, said the officer. Get that jackal off my screen, ordered Chekapov, and the image of Lord Speaker Castellan Van Sophronius vanished. He blusters like a prize fighter who knows he is outclassed, said Colonel Hartz, a hereditary officer who had nevertheless earned every medal he wore on his chest, along with the dueling scars on his face. He seeks to intimidate, but these are words of desperation. But the allies of which he speaks are real enough, replied Colonel Dukrastmir of the Luthermark Death Warders. I have body bags that fill with evidence of that. Dukrastamir pointed a meaty finger to illustrate the point. He was as huge as a shaven bear, his physical presence somehow enhanced by the fact that both his legs and his left arm had been lost in combat and replaced with oily functional bionics. This is a message for his own people. They have been conditioned to obey everything the damned Aristia say. There are only so many mortal threats on this world for him to call on. He needs the people of Opus to believe they can beat us too. And what news of these allies have we collated? Said Chekapov. They have shown their hand in Kazale at least. Lieutenant Mace, what are we dealing with? One of the intelligence officers cleared her throat and stood up. She had a grayish, strained look to her, with a tight, lean face, and black hair drawn up in a severe bun. Kektrips had compiled the likely identities of some moral threats he believed were hiding on Opus. Some of those, in turn, have appeared to defend Kazale. Karnakal Sixfinger is the warrior witnessed by the 212th Delitions. He is believed to be a renegade Astartes, probably in a military command role. Hekton sappers infiltrating the underground transportation system encountered a witch who can be identified with Draven Stahl, a longtime Inquisition target. And the center, engaged by the Kilgarans, was probably a possessee, and a witch named by Ketrips as Anathica Wyrax. One of yours, said Chekapov to Dephobius. My brother Imperial Fists brought Wyrax to battle, said Dephobius. The heretic was engaged by our support craft. I have offered all intelligence gained in this to your staff. Where did they come from? Said Chekapov. Kektrips was so close to finding out when he was killed. What secrets the Aristia may be keeping. To have executed an inquisitor and brought the Imperium's vengeance on their world. And why? Said Dephobius. What prize is Opus to such a gallery of traitors and witches? This is a populous world, it is certain, and the Imperium would suffer much from its loss. But the same could be said of one of a million worlds. These threats are not homegrown. They are not native to this world. Something brought them here. If we knew what it was, we might understand much more about who is really in control of the enemy here. Then it is not Velsopranus? Said Colonel Hartz. Indeed it is not, replied Dephobius. Many times have the Imperial Fists taken to war against the slaves of the Dark Gods, and every one of those traitors has believed that he is in charge of his own destiny. They are never in charge of anything. They are puppets of a greater power, a power which must be hunted down and destroyed as the true enemy. Velsopranus probably believes that he is the leader of Opus's resistance to the Imperium, but in truth, he is being controlled by something far worse than a renegade governor. Dephobius paused, holding out a hand as if weighing something. But don't let that dissuade you from killing him. He will be added to the target list, said Chikopov. It is getting rapidly longer. On which note, gentlemen, the defense of Gazelle has forced us to alter our plan for Opus. The moral threats of the city are utilizing its populations in numbers we did not expect. This is unfortunate, but not without precedent, and has been planned for. We will not behead the resistance on Opus by storming and capturing Gazelle rapidly. A secondary plan to surround, invade, and reduce other key cities of Opus will be instituted immediately. Naval and guard reinforcements have been demanded, and the reserves currently in orbit, which were to be used in the refounding and subjugation duties, will be committed to the ground. This has gone from a battle to a war, but we are prepared for war, and it will be won. Librarian Dephobius listened to the intricacies of the plan that Chikopov had drafted. It was thorough and detailed, completely within the dictates of the Tactica Imperium, which all the officers of the Imperial military were trained. Opus's key cities, Makosham, Darts, Rekba, would be encircled and besieged if necessary, cutting off movement of fuel, supplies, and manpower from one another until they collapsed, and all the moral threats and Aristia members inside were hunted down and executed. It would be a long, cruel process, and the people of Opus would suffer much even if they avoided the forced recruitment of the Aristia forces, which was happening across Kazale. But Chikopov was right. The Imperium would win. If Kektrips did not underestimate the number of witches and arch-heretics on Opus, if the enemy was only able to use Opus's citizens as suicide troops and militia, if killing off the Aristia would actually make any difference to the true leadership on Opus. Dephobius looked through the files the intelligence staff had collected on the moral threats so far encountered. Dephobius had already seen the reports from Gorgothian, the Shadowhawk pilot, on the appearance of Anaka Wyrax, and what she had done to the citizens under her command. He noted that she had been seen before, and committed a string of heresies on worlds across the galactic eastern rim, half a galaxy away from Opus. Carnical Sixfinger had last been seen trying to break through naval cordons around the Eye of Terror. What were any of them doing on Opus? Who or what had the power to bring them here? And what was on Opus that they were trying to achieve at the expense of being brought to battle by the full might of the Imperial military? Answers would be found in the battles to come, as more and more of Opus was prized open to uncover the corruption within, and Dephobius knew it would be the Imperial Fists who would find themselves in the toughest of the fighting, that the Space Marines would have to cut all those answers from the flesh of the enemy. Lysander set up the Imperial Fist camp in the battle plains, where the chapter's scout bikers had conducted their interception missions just hours before. Bunkers had been dropped from orbit to half bury themselves in the parched ground. Between them, tanks and aircraft were parked between the structures, and sentry guns tracked across the plains. The Imperial Fists were consisted of around half company strength, little more than 50 Space Marines, along with the same number again of augmented chapter maintenance crews and other menials. Many of the chapter's crewmen were working on the Sanctifier, repairing the wounds it had suffered at the hands of Wyrax and her sorcery. And the mobile forge belched smoke as its artificers repaired and adapted weapons and vehicle parts to suit the battles now being laid out. Squadron Stelinus' Vindicator self-propelled weapons were being loaded and fueled to join the advance into Gazale. From this stronghold, codenamed Sigismund's Point, the Imperial Fists readied themselves for the missions sure to be needed on Gazale over the next few days. As moral threats revealed themselves, the Imperial Fists would have to be the ones to intercept them. One of Sigismund Point's bunkers was not a barracks or an armory. It was a mobile prison block with half a dozen cells. A pair of Imperial Fists stood guard outside the windowless block, and inside, in the cool, dry, recycled air and gloomy half-light, the only prisoner so far locked up inside sat in the corner of her cell. Captain Lysander hauled the doorway open. The woman looked at him, squinting in the relatively bright light from the outside the cell. She was disheveled and dirty, as she had been when Lysander brought her here, but she was alive and healthy. "You cannot leave," said Lysander. "Not yet." "I know," said Sarek. "Moral quarantine." Lysander motioned to a table outside the cell. On the table was a meal of water and ration blocks. Sarek sat down and began eating with as much speed and dignity it would allow. She had not eaten for some time. "Lord Commander Chikopov does not know you exist," said Lysander. "He would expect us to hand you over to him. But the Adeptus Astartes keeps its own counsel on such matters. And," said Sarek between mouthfuls, "there is something happening on this planet that goes a damn long way beyond a madman deciding he doesn't want to cough up his tides anymore. You don't know who to trust besides yourselves. So here I am." "We have contacts with Chekopov's staff," continued Lysander. "We know that you are Lucreza Sarek Voss." Sarek laughed a little, snorting water from her glass. "Lucreza is my given name. It comes from a grandmother on my father's side, who is supposed to have been a very poisonous woman. I go by Sarek. That was the town where I was born. It seemed the least offensive to all my names." "You are a psyker," said Lysander. "On my good days I am a telekine. And you are part of Ketrup's mission to Opus. I was there when he died." Lysander sat down opposite Sarek. "What happened?" "It was an ambush. Whoever hit us knew where we were. And they were off-worlders too. Not anyone from Opus." "Could they have been mercenaries?" "They were mind-wiped," said Sarek. "So no, I don't think so. They weren't corrupted either. Whoever sent them, it wasn't one of the moral threats Ketrips was after. Not without a couple layers between them and us, at least. And then I hid out," said Sarek, "and Makasham. But the Euristia were after me. I think it was them anyways. I got out of Makasham and made it to Rebecca. There was a safe house where Ketrips had set up. When I reached it, it was full of Euristia troops. The next thing I know, I'm in the pyramid, in the coffin. They asked me some of the sort of things as you are. I think they wanted to know how much Ketrips had found out." "They? Janik and his cult?" "Thronatera, yes. I saw him. Believe me, seeing him was enough. Something like that. Just being in the same room as it. It pollutes your soul. I think they were keeping me intact for whatever reason. We have exercises they teach us, mental exercises. I didn't let myself think of what they were going to do with me. I've seen men go mad in places like that. I didn't let myself become one of them. I think that's the difference between people who can do the kind of things we do and everyone else. We're not stronger or smarter or anything like that. It's not being psychic or 3 meters tall or whatever we do that counts. We can see the worst of what there is and carry on. That's the difference. We can be trusted with knowing that things make everyone else go crazy. Who is Legistrasse? Sarek shrugged. Janik asked me that too. I got the impression he knew the answer. Again, he just wanted to know if we knew. As an agent of the throne, I swear I did not know. I've never heard the name, or whatever it is, before. But there is something that he didn't get out of me. Something I knew that he didn't. Lysander looked at this woman. She was wasted from malnutrition. Her eyes were still bright. The Inquisition had done well by picking an agent who could go through the hell the Holy Ordos required of her. The real question was whether she could be trusted at all. Tell me, said Lysander. Sarek shook his head. Get me off this world, back to the Inquisition, where I can carry on my work, and do not let me go through Chekhov people. You make this happen yourself. And in return for this great generosity, I'll give you the location of the thing I hid in Repka before I was captured. It's proof of what you're really dealing with on Opus. You know what it signifies when you see it. Lysander sat back. I'm not one given to negotiations, but I am, Captain. Believe me, I have something you want, and you can give me what I want. There's not much I ask. We could tear what you know from your mind, said Lysander. I know, said Sarek. But that is a resource better used on enemies here on Opus, is it not? And besides, we are both servants of the same Emperor. We both seek vengeance for the death of Ketrips and the destruction of the heretics on this planet. Such treatment of an ally would hardly become the honor of the Imperial Fist, now would it? No, it would not, conceded Lysander. But you will not get beyond our sight. If you do not deliver, you will be back in our custody, or handed over to Chekhov. A situation you seem to fear greatly. Understood? Of course, said Sarek. Then I shall have a pilot deliver you to the wings of Dorn in orbit. Sarek took another mouthful of rations. She paused and looked up. I have yet to thank you for saving me. As you say, said Lysander, we are on the same side. Scout Sergeant Orphos could barely see where the refugee camp ended. The mass of prefabricated hablocks and handmade shanties almost merging with the dusty horizon. The Imperial force had brought a great many buildings to construct the camp, but they were not nearly enough, and the people fleeing Kazeo had done their best to make the shortfall with whatever material they could scavenge from the battle planes. Their shacks were built from rusted armor plates and tank wheels dug from the dirt. Orphos watched the people as the Chimera APC drove through the camp. The top hatches were open, and from this vantage point he could see citizens hurrying through the dusty streets and herding their families out of sight. For the Imperial Army, especially the Space Marines, were icons of fear. Orphos had only brought Graeus along from his squad, knowing that a full unit of Space Marines would be enough to spark a panic riot. Have they named this place yet? Said Scout Graeus. The Emperor's Embrace, said Orphos, but I doubt many of these people are calling it that. They're saying we have 400,000 here before it's all done, said the Chimera driver, an Imperial Guardsman of the 309th Aleutian Lancers. Good money says every fifth of them will be a heretic. Orphos watched as another chimera, this one with its passenger's compartment replaced with a flatbed, trundled through the cramped alleyways, collecting bodies. Many of the people trickling out of Kazale were wounded or diseased, and the dead mounted up, and despite the efforts of the Sisters Hospitaller, who had set up a Medicaid post in one of the half blocks. And some people came in healthy, were turning up dead to violence. It was impossible to see what happened below the surface of the Emperor's embrace. No one here trusted the forces of the Imperium. The only thing they feared more than the Imperial Guard and the Space Marines were the powers of Kazale from when they fled. "This place could blow up any second," said Grayus. "All it needs is a few heretics to stir up revolt, and Chekhov will have the whole camp bombed to ash." "These are the people for whom we fight," said Orphos. "We must never forget that. These people would stab us in our beds given the chance," said the driver. "That's what I won't forget." The Chimera pulled up to one of the hab blocks. Already the inhabitants had boarded up the windows with armor plating, and a slab of rusted steel stood in the front of the doorway. Orphos jumped out. "Stay here," he said to Grayus. Orphos hauled the slab away from the doorway. It was dark inside, and fearful eyes watched from the windows. He walked in, letting the slab fall into place behind him. The hab block was a dismal single-story building, shoddily prefabricated, and already home to what looked like dozens of people, huddling in bunks hanging from the walls. At the far end was a makeshift portion of rags. A few citizens, rather bolder than the rest, stood in front of it, as if on guard. Orphos approached. The men stood aside for Orphos, and he pulled the curtain back. A man lay among the rag-stuffed cushions, the most comfort the people here had been able to fashion for him. He was in late middle age, Orphos guessed, though it was difficult to tell, given the strange greenish-gray tinge of his skin, and the way his face hung, as if his bulk had been sucked out of him, and suddenly leaving him sagging and empty. His hair was graying, and the skin of his neck, continuing down under the blankets that covered him, was pocked with raw, weeping wounds, like clusters of tiny bite marks. The man looked up at Orphos and smiled. "You have come," he said. "You let it be known," replied Orphos, "that you would speak with only a member of the Adeptus Astartes, so here I am. I cannot trust anyone else," said the man. "I have seen what happened to Opus. Sometimes it seemed I alone was aware. We were infiltrated slowly, man by man, it seemed. Oh, that vengeance that has fallen us. I welcome it. I wish only that I could have done something to bring it about sooner." "First I may ask," said Orphos, "who are you?" The man held out a clenched fist. His trembling fingers opened to reveal a badge, such as might be pinned on the lapel of an adept's uniform to denote his rank. It was the shape of a skull over a quill. "My name is Losen," he said. "You are an adept at the administratum," said Orphos. "I was once, but no longer. I was, rather lax in the upholding of my vows to the Imperium." "What did you do?" "I stole rather a lot of money. Or rather, I tried to. I was found out, stripped of my adept status, and marooned here to await the return of the tithing missions and the imposition of my punishment. But the tithing mission did not come. You did, and with you, all the fires of the Imperial's fury. I still serve the Imperium, Space Marine. I am a good man, but I am dying. My lungs are scarred with acid from the shells of your artillery, and in my final moments I will serve my Emperor." Orphos knelt by the dying one's adept. "Then tell me what you know." "There is a legend of these people," said Losen, "of the King of Crows." "I have heard of it," said Orphos. "It is a folk tale of Opus, one that the Imperial intelligence thought might be used in propaganda against us." "Yes, it is true," the kindly robber, the master trickster, the fox. But it is true, I had kept my ears open, Space Marine. All the time I was in exile here. The folklore of this world is more than folklore. The King of Crows is real, and here he is. I have heard tell the traitors among the refugees here are moving him through the camp to safety. This King of Crows, is he a moral threat? I believe so. Perhaps some demagogue native to Opus. Perhaps just a name adopted by one of the heretics in Kazeo. By the name, it buys him loyalty from the malcontented among the citizens. He merely speaks it, and they seek to aid him. He is here in the camp. It is death to speak of it to an outsider, but death has me already, and I do not care. Lawson sat up, grimacing with the pain of it. Do you hear? I do not care. The King of Crows can take me. I have already given my soul to the Emperor. Where is he? Said Orphos. Somewhere near. He cannot move in the open. Whatever he is, he must... Orphos held up a hand to silence Lawson. The sound he had heard, hidden among the chamber and construction cap, was the cocking of a weapon. Orphos drew his bolt pistol, unsheathing his combat knife with his left hand. Bullets shredded the curtain of rags, and the air was filled with superheated lead. Lawson was thrown back against the wall of the hab, body torn open, bored through with explosive fire. Impact shuddered Orphos's greaves and breastplate. A scout's armor did not have the resilience of a full suit of power armor, but it held. The gloom would have hindered anyone else, but Orphos's enhanced eyes could make out the refugees advancing on him. They looked like any other refugees, save for the rags they wore around their faces and the auto guns and stub pistols they held. 6 of them had made it to the hab block, the citizens inside too terrified to even move to stop them. The first second or so, Orphos shot 2 of them, one in the head, the other through the upper chest. Explosive bolter shots against the unarmored targets left an appalling mess of blood and shattered bone against the walls and ceiling. The others scattered, save for one who charged at Orphos, stub pistol blazing in his hand. Orphos trusted his battle gear, felt a round impact against the chest plate of his armor, and rammed the combat knife into the man's abdomen. He felt the resistance as the blade met the spine. Orphos dropped the body to the ground. The enemy were thrown back for a moment. He glanced back. Lawson was dead, no doubt about that. Orphos left his curse unvoiced. He ran to the door of the hab block, backing up against the doorframe. A body at his feet could have been any of the citizens here. Any of the hundreds of thousands fleeing Gazale, or even of the millions of them on this planet. But this particular citizen had given his life to the powers that ruled Gazale, in hopes of keeping the secrets of the King of Crows from the Imperial Fists. People were running in every direction. Some were screaming. Orphos made out the face scarves of the attackers on a few and snapped shots at them, uncertain if he hit them. The Chimera's engine was starting, and Scout Grayus was manipulating the vehicle's mounted heavy stubber into position. "Vengeance upon you!" yelled Grayus, and opened up with the heavy stubber. The hammering of the weapon drowned the sound of panic, and one of the shanties disintegrated, taking the gunman inside with it. Grayus panned his weapon around, shredding an alleyway between the shanties where 2 of the enemy had held. Orphos recognized the silhouette of a shoulder-mounted rocket launcher on the roof of a hab block opposite. A rocket spiraled before he could react, missing the Chimera by a meter or so, and ripping a great explosion of dust and debris out of the massive makeshift housing. Orphos sighted through the dust, and shot the enemy down before he could reload. The body fell, and Orphos could see it at the coveralls of a foundry worker, the same as thousands of the refugees in the Emperor's embrace. Grayus fired another burst into the people wandering dazed from the explosion. Some had guns in their hands, their faces covered. Some did not. "Cease fire!" yelled Orphos. Graius, cease fire! He sprinted from the doorway and vaulted up the Chimera's passenger compartment. See? Said the driver. They'd have our bloody heads if they could, all of them. Get us out of here. Gunfire pinged against the vehicle, sporadic and ill-directed. Orphos looked over the edge of the top hatch to see the wounded crawling away with limbs blown off. The dead with torsos or heads ruined. Some were the enemy without doubt, some were not. Some he couldn't tell. He could hear the panic and the anger spreading, like a shockwave, like a virulent disease. It was ripping out through the Emperor's embrace. The dead would become martyrs in the minds of everyone who believed the Imperium were here to destroy and enslave. The guns in the hands of the enemy had become proof to the Imperial forces that the Emperor's embrace was infested with heretics. And the King of Crows, Orphos could keep that to himself.